Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday to you, and welcome to our lunchtime discussion on COVID-19 and Leon County Sector Survey. I'm Kathleen Spihar, Executive Director of COCA, the Council on Culture and Arts. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this conversation. So joining me today are co-hosts Amber Tynan, the Executive Director of United Partners in Human Services, also known as UPHS, and Kim Grippa, who's the Executive Director of the Institute for Nonprofit Innovation and Excellence, also known as INIE. And if you'd like, feel free to use the chat to introduce yourself too. You'll see that the chat is at the very bottom of your screen. And then the collaboration between COCA, INIE, and UPHS began just over 2 years ago during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the needs have continued to fluctuate in many parts of our sector, we recognize the value and power of cross-sector collaboration. So we're here today to catch you up on what's happening in our sector and to share results from our most recent survey, How Are You Doing? COVID-19 Sector Survey. And over to you, Kim.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just a couple of things you'll need to know today. This public event is being recorded and streamed on Facebook Live. Social media will be monitored by COCA staff, and we'll do our best to provide an answer for every question that is asked. If you'd like to share, please feel free to use the Q&A feature or raise your hand, and we'll invite you to unmute. You'll find the raise hand feature on the bottom black bar of your screen. On the right, under reactions. Before we dive into the data results related to the impact of COVID-19, we thought it would be helpful to take a look at the pandemic's current situation. According to the CDC, the COVID-19 pandemic continues. The one-dose vaccination rate in the county is currently just shy of 67%, and free COVID testing sites in the capital city region continue. Over the past 2 years, the city and county have provided a variety of program assistance addressing pandemic-related hardships. However, some programs, like rental assistance, have ended. Now to share our survey results, I turn it over to Amber.
Thank you so much, Kim and Kathleen and everybody who's here with us. We had 85 participants who completed the survey. This is the third year that we have conducted this survey. It has varied in the questioning throughout the 3 years as the pandemic has progressed, but we are excited to share with you the results of this latest version for 2022, and then open the floor at the end for some questions, as well as ways to engage and things that might have changed since the survey has closed. So with that, Hillary, if you would go to the next slide. So this slide's really just going to give you a baseline of the subsector survey representation of those who completed the survey. You can see the top two tiers were specifically human service organizations at 43%. Then we had arts and cultural organizations at 32%, educational organizations 12%, housing and workforce development organizations 3%, and then 10% representative of others. And that could be anything from associations, credit unions, and environmental organizations. Next slide. A breakdown just to give you a better understanding of who completed the survey by asset size and their annual operating budgets. You can see in the graph to the left down at the bottom how that is broken down, but 64% of our respondents have an operating budget of $500,000 or less. And of that, 40% are really small, more grassroots organizations with $100,000 or less. Next. So let's talk about the COVID-19 impacts of the survey. What we learned is that 84% of nonprofits have had to cancel events as a result of COVID-19. And this is still true in this current fiscal year that we're in, 2022. And 44% of them have had to either shutter or cease program service delivery. 100% of everybody that responded shared they sustained some sort of financial loss due to COVID, and only 38% have been able to make up those shortfalls. And by making up those shortfalls, some of that has been through cash reserves, grant flexibility, local, state, and federal stimulus support, as well as private contributions. And despite that, 22% of our nonprofits have shared that over the tenure of the pandemic, they have had to lay off, terminate, or furlough staff and employees. Next slide. What we've also learned is that our nonprofits are resilient, but we're continuously pivoting. We still have a number of you that are transitioning and maintaining a hybrid model as it relates to your service delivery and events. 29% are doing both virtual and in-person this year. 11% are transitioning to virtual only still for program delivery and events. And 15% of those respondents shared that they will be rescheduling all of their events, hopefully in 2023. Next slide. Despite what we're seeing with the pandemic, 42% of the nonprofits, thanks to the advocacy efforts of this cohort, have received local, state, and/or federal COVID-19 stimulus funding. I know a number of you that participated have received local CARES as well as ARPA funding, potentially some shuttered venues funding. And with that, we've seen a decrease in the overall need of the sector from last year's survey result, actually a 75% decrease in financial assistance required. And this year, of the 85 that were surveyed, we learned that an additional $2.2 million in financial assistance is needed to sustain our nonprofits through the end of the year. Next slide. And lastly, this is no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, but we learned that 65% of you that responded have seen an increase in need for services, 73 of which are unable to meet the increased demand for services. 13% are unable to meet the demand at all, and 27% of those that responded are able to meet 100% of the need. So I think that speaks to the constant perpetual effects that we're seeing of COVID-19, and the needs of our neighbors are constantly changing, but our nonprofits having to adapt and adjust to how they can support and provide adequate service delivery. And I believe that's the last slide for me. Yep, it is. We do have a one-page infographic, which in just a second we'll share in the chat. But I'll turn it back over to Kathleen for, or Kim for some comments.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber. And that was a really wonderful presentation. For those of you that are saying hello, thank you so much for doing that. Anyone else that wants to say hi to each other in the chat, please do. And these slides and materials, I just wanted to confirm, will be available. And we're planning to send everybody that signed up for this webinar these materials. But please think about some questions and get your questions ready. So Kim, I know you've got some things, some takeaways to share. You want to go ahead and start? I think you're on mute right now.
I do that at least once a Zoom session. So
fine, we got it over
there.
with.
Check the box. I did it. Okay. So thank you. Some takeaways from the survey. We did see a 20% increase in participation from 2021. There was a healthy representation from social services, arts, culture, history, heritage, education, and other nonprofits, with each representing about a third of overall responses. Service demands are up, we know that, with 30% being fully met and 70% a variety of partially met. And over 60% of services are being delivered in the hybrid style, which is a combination of in-person and virtual.
That's wonderful. Thank you. It's been interesting because as we've been, this is our third survey that we've been able to do, and we weren't sure about what kinds of techniques or what kinds of offerings we're going to continue on after, as COVID continues to trend, but, kind of what's sticking with us. And so it's really helpful to see what some of these survey results did. And this is also just a reminder too, that this survey did come out in March and April. And so the end of April is when we were compiling some of these results. So this is pretty fresh data still. And that's something else as we look at questions, if you have some changes or things that have especially if you've taken the survey and if there's any updates you want to provide, we absolutely want to hear them. In addition to what Kim shared, it was so interesting to look at the budget and what's been going on and how COVID has impacted budgets, because as nonprofits, our budgets are impacted whether there's a pandemic or not. There's always factors that are pushing and pulling at it. So it was just so great to see how many small nonprofits are doing such big work. That 65% of respondents having budget sizes of 500K with less than 40% at the 100K or less level is just really outstanding and astounding to see. And I just want to compliment all of you that are here that are doing that really important work. And as small nonprofit organizations, we can see how much we rely on you for those kinds of services. It's just really important you've got the resources to continue them. But what was also interesting that we saw, a key takeaway, is everybody had a financial challenge. So financial challenges were from 100% of the respondents. And that's really unusual in a survey. You don't usually get 100% of everybody that says, we all agree. And this one they did. So everyone that took the survey said that financial challenges were definitely present, and it was a perfect storm of increased demands for services is what we saw, and then a decreased funding opportunities. And those decreased funding opportunities especially came through with those canceled and postponed events and with shuttered programs and things like that. I mean, we definitely are very thankful for the kinds of resources that we have been able to receive, especially at the height of the pandemic with stimulus and with programs like INIE and CARES and ARPA and so on. But we don't want that to change the fact that really what we have is we always have these financial challenges have been continued on, and especially how the events, the postponement of events and cancellations of events and shutter programs and things have really have impacted it. We also looked at another key takeaway, and kind of the final key takeaway that I have is that additional money needed to meet service demands. And service demands continue. I mean, not just 5 or 10%, like 65% of the service demands are being met or needed, but that service demands continue to increase, and we're almost like trying to run and catch up to ourselves. So as we're trying to catch up with more resources for demands, the demands are continuing to increase, and that's just something that we always, as a sector, really want to identify and talk about, how we can meet that. I also wanted to one last thing, and that good news that Amber shared at the end about the 75% decrease of need in the sector overall need from last year really also shows that despite the fact that there is still $2.2 million need for this year, for this calendar year, to get us through as a sector, it has drastically improved by 75% from last year. So kudos to those improvements, putting those improvements in place. We're just incredibly happy about that. So we're going to open the floor now to some questions and things. So Kim, why don't you go ahead and come back on again? And then Hillary, why don't you go ahead and take the slide down? We'll go ahead and pull slides up as we need to, but we just want to make sure that you've got us and our undivided attention for any questions and things that you have. So let's go ahead. We'll check the Q&A, which right now we don't have any questions in. And let's just see if there's anything also. Did anyone put anything in the chat as far as questions go? Or comments. So we've got not seeing any questions right now. So I think that if you have any questions, you'd like to go ahead and pop them into the Q&A and chat, we can go ahead and address them. Or if there's some sharings that you'd like to do from the time that the survey came out. So it came out, March, April, we compiled everything at the end of April. So the last, 5-6 weeks, have there been any changes or updates that you'd like to share? We'd love to hear those too. So I'll just pause for a second to see if anyone wants to jump in. Any of our attendees want to? We kind of have a going once, going twice right now, and I think we'll we'll just keep that invitation open to you, and we'll go ahead and go into some questions that we have. And so I think that's over to you, Kim.
Thank you. Did anyone not get a chance to respond to the survey that would like to share with us how COVID impacted your operations, your finances, your programming? We'd love to hear from you.
And is there any way, I don't think that we can in a webinar, for folks that if they raise their hand or submit a question that we can elevate them to speak live if necessary?
I can do that. Hi, it's Erica. If somebody, I can allow anybody to talk if they would like to. Yes.
Well, I think Terry M also has a question about any programs or strategies that proved sustainable throughout the pandemic. I know I can address that with one of our survey questions talked about, delivery of programs. And so we were interested in seeing that hybrid has really stayed. So some programs and some organizations are still mainly virtual, but we've seen a move and a shift and actually keeping hybrid programs going. And that so that's a shift in a sustainable way to continue to deliver services and keep things accessible, equitable, and still address what the needs of what the pandemic is showing us and as a community.
Yeah, and what I'll just share, sorry, Erica, what I'll just share, Terry, to that point, unless we have folks that are participating that want to share, us specifically with human services, we were fortunate, but yet unfortunate, because providing direct critical human services, we are really the first line of defense for providing support and services to our neighbors that are in need. But what we found really worked well, and I think it happens organically anyway with nonprofits in general, but specifically human services, is leveraging partnerships with one another to really coordinate resources in a way that maximize the impact. So instead of 10 organizations doing their own events to provide outreach or support in a community when it was necessary, really working together to do one event in communities of need and bringing everybody to the table to access the resources that were necessary really helped us thrive throughout the pandemic, but also looking at how we could really leverage the strengths of one another to make a maximum impact.
Absolutely. The power of partnerships always has been, and certainly programs that leaned into that. We're looking at the ways that impact and effectiveness were just really skyrocketing. There is also, when we were talking about hybrid, I don't want to lose this during our hybrid conversation. Dan Taylor had asked about being really interested in hybrid and how it changed the way nonprofits do business and what are the hybrid challenges. So what are the hybrid challenges with that? And if anyone would like to share, we'd love to hear that.
Well, I'll just say the challenges are both on the provider and the user end, I think. So it's finding out what works for the users and the providers. And I know I still have some technical gaps every now and then with Zoom. So it's been a learning curve as well, I think, to provide courses and other things online. We're all getting better at it. And I'd like to get a sense from this discussion going forward, how people feel about future offerings. Do they want this to continue?
And it looks like Melanie Mays can talk about hybrid options.
Melanie, you can speak.
Oh, you hear me? Are you hearing me? Good.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The hybrid turned out to be probably our saving grace, I have to say. Boy, was it a steep learning curve. It was really hard because there's really not a lot of people who can help you with it. So it's a lot of trial by error, you know. During the pandemic, we were able to stay open because what we did is instead of live streaming, because so many people were having difficulty with that, we did pre-recorded video. And our musicians were very kind to take a small cut in fee so that we could still have them. And they supplied their own pre-recorded videos for both their performances and their educational outreach. And we then gave them money toward their recording. We helped them with the recording. So it ended up being great. They were so relieved, actually, to be able to still perform. It was such a nice experience. And then we did something called a Meet the Artist chat. And so anyone who was a season ticket holder was able to, on the day of the concert, because theoretically you could watch the video anytime during the concert day. So, and actually for several days after, we allowed it to stay up a long time. So we had a Meet the Artist chat, and the artist would come on at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., something like that. And we would do a Zoom call, and people could come in and actually talk to the artists, even though they didn't get to hear them play live, they just were watching a pre-recorded video. But it was a really nice thing, and everybody really enjoyed it so much that this year we continued the Meet the Artist chats because our concerts were live. Our concerts were also live streamed, and we asked WFSU to do that. And I can't tell you how glad I am that we chose to use professionals like WFSU, because they did a fantastic job. They knew how to operate the equipment at Opperman Hall. We had 3 cameras operating, making great shots. So our videos looked fantastic. Our live stream and our video looked fabulous. Yeah, it was an expense, and we hadn't really budgeted for it because we didn't know exactly how we were going to handle it, but we were able with donations and things like that, a little grant money, to make it work. And we're going to continue it. I did a survey for our last concert, and we asked, do you want us to continue with the live streaming? Do you like it? And overwhelmingly, our responses were yes, keep the live streaming going. It's so nice that if we don't feel safe coming to the live performance, we can still sit and watch the concert. And the fact that this year, we left our concerts up for a full week after the performance. We left the video up, and people really enjoyed it. I won't tell you that it was easy to do the live streaming. There were issues. We used Vimeo, which is a very high-end platform. That's where we house the videos, but some people have trouble getting to it. And we found that iPhones are the culprit. They have a great deal of difficulty connecting somehow with Vimeo. So I was ending up having to give people just the link live to Vimeo rather than have them try to get it through our website. Now that could have also been website issues, and we're getting our website redone this year. So there's just a lot of little technical things and expenses that have popped up that we weren't really planning to have that now we have. But overall, I think it worked pretty well. The only other problem was I'm the only box office person. So as we're doing the concert, people are trying to text me, and I'm trying to sell tickets, and I'm trying to handle all of the emails and the texts and all this stuff coming in at the same time. I'm trying to sell tickets to get people into the concert, and I'm trying to deal with anyone who's having problems getting into the live stream. So it really, this coming year, I'm actually budgeting to have someone who is very tech savvy to be able to sit with me and help me do that, so I can continue customer service and they can maybe help with the other problems, or vice versa, either way. So it was a learning curve, and I'm glad our audiences, they were very kind. But overall, the live streaming was gorgeous. I was so pleased with it, and I'm very pleased. I do like Vimeo because I think it's a much better platform than YouTube. And you don't have as much trouble. And because we don't go through social media, we don't have to worry about our concerts being canceled on us, because we're just going through Vimeo straight to our website. So it's not being scrubbed by bots, which, if any of this sounds weird to you all, I'll be happy to, if anybody just wants to call me, I can explain more in depth, because I learned way too much about all this. And I'm
such
old.
a kind offer. Yeah. So Melanie, when you get a chance, if you just want to go ahead and put your email address and phone number in the chat, that would be awesome. And then that way folks can use you as a
Great.
resource. And the takeaways that you talked about with that hybrid programming, about hiring professionals and about increasing access and making the longevity of some of the content too, so people can just enjoy it. All those things are huge advantages of that hybrid programming, and are certainly when we talk about programming demands, are definitely have been added to those. So thank you so much for sharing your comments. We appreciate it.
And just one quick thing, I wanted to say thank you to Kathleen and Erica, because Erica was the one who was sort of in charge of all the grant stuff when we started into COVID. And if it hadn't been for Erica, I'll be quite honest, I would not have applied for probably half of the grants, loans, things that became available, because I was just sort of, I didn't really know what to do. And Erica pushed me, and I'm glad she pushed me, because it was the right thing to do. And it helped us. We were able to maintain a program that some had to shut down. We were able to do it. So yay, thank you guys.
You got your testimonial on film now. So we got that about the power, because the power of initiative, and how organizations like ours, our three organizations are here to do exactly what you're talking about right now. Advocate, to support you, and to make sure that you are being successful. And that's what we do. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Before we move to our next question, I do want to add a different lens, well, maybe complement what Melanie just shared, but specific to our industry, Dan, obviously, to this question, it was really difficult in the first few months of COVID to see people face to face. So being able to have a hybrid option and do case management and triage the needs of clients on the front end through a computer screen was new and different. It took a lot of technological upgrades for our agencies to be able to do that, but this is something that will now carry long-term with our organizations as a tool and a strategy for adequate client engagement. I think the other piece that's worked really well from a hybrid perspective for our sector is from the event standpoint. We've been able to drive down cost of what it would to host it in an actual facility. Not to say that we don't want to do that, arts and cultural people, we do. But we've been able to drive down the cost because we can do everything virtually. And with that, our audience and our bandwidth and our exposure is broadened, and we're able to reach more people. And we've seen that more people have become aware of the work that our nonprofits are doing. They're increasing their donor bases because their live streamed events or virtual events have been able to reach different populations. But I think the challenge with that too is also a double-edged sword. Our sector is so rooted in serving people and that day-to-day, face-to-face interaction and the relationships that it's really hard to establish that in an authentic way behind a screen. I know that's something that I've struggled with meeting new members behind a screen before you ever meet them in person. So I think there's definitely pros and cons with the hybrid approach. And I think it is absolutely something that is here to stay by way of in which our sector not only delivers services, but also events and reaching broader audiences.
Those are great points, Amber. And I know that UPHS is actually, you're so on the forefront of also piloting all this. And your conference next week is going to be, partial hybrid, and or it's going to be hybrid conference, partial in person and partial virtual too, with those options. And so I'm really excited to see how people respond to that and this kind of feedback that you get, because that, the idea of increasing accessibility and increasing content, really kind of the accessibility to content. And the longevity of that, plus putting together experiences where you really feel authentic, relational kinds of interactions and not just transactional. I mean, that all those things, like we want all of those things as part of how we are together, and so I'll be really curious to see how this comes out, because I agree with you. We also see the kind of across the board with some of our grantees and just in our own industry, the advantages of what hybrid brings. But at the same time, like for live performance, there's nothing like a live performance. And there's a lot of chomping at the bit to get back to concert halls and to make sure it's done safely and so on. And that is happening in fits and spurts, but it is happening, which it didn't necessarily happen that way last year. So we know that we're ahead of where we were. We've got some time to go, some places to go, but we also are very respectful to the needs of all of our community and making sure that is met. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I would like to add, I'm glad that Melanie pointed out some of the issues that the end user had with receiving the content. So we have access is always the biggest thing. We need to make sure that what we're doing, everyone has access to. So sorting through those issues on the other end, even if we've got it down, we need to make sure that our members and those who need the information and can get it in the way that they need to. So yeah, I like the hybrid model. I think it balances the two concerns that were raised. And I think we're all getting to a place where it's working.
And it's interesting in the nonprofit sector, just to respond to that, Kim, and that looking at that kind of finance first. We always want to make sure we're using our resources as wisely as possible and so on, but it has to be balanced out with the needs of the community, and the needs of the community are all the things that we've already talked about, and how are those weighed? So, so that if an answer financially is hybrid, and you go 100% hybrid, then how is that impacting those other priorities? And so really understanding the values, the priorities of what your organization needs to offer, the priorities, especially of who you're servicing, the community that you're servicing, the audiences that you're servicing, what do they need, and how is that shifting, and how do you need to shift in order to meet that? That has got to be prominent in all of our conversations now, and as we also move forward, because how we use those resources are really going to need to meet those needs, not like we're going to change the needs in order to meet a financial formula, and that can be so hard sometimes to balance out.
Well, I think that leads us into our next kind of question that we want to pose to the group. And please, we encourage you all to participate. We're looking for the hands raised. But, as we think about how we have evolved and how we constantly adjust and pivot, and how we will probably have to do that for, quite a long time from now. Where are all of you as it relates to your program and service delivery? Has anything changed? Do you align with what we've shared as part of the survey results? Are there challenges you're having? What are you all experiencing?
We're looking for hands, and we're looking for responses in the chat. I can to move this along, I can also share a little bit of what COCA has done. I mean, really two things. We've been space sharing with our building, which has been really fantastic. So we've got a tenant on the first floor, an arts and culture tenant, and then we've got on the second floor, we are our co-working space, and that has really been very dynamic. It's not only kept us safe, it is kind of challenged us to look at resources and how we use them differently, and has been a really good part of it. It's really connected us more with another partner that's part of our industry, and kind of a day-to-day idea of what that is. And then our use of technology. We have been able to have meet with more of our sector than not, especially during the height of COVID, and as we were kind of coming out of COVID too, just in larger groups. It's just we've gotten to know people differently and better, and the amount of kind of what we call client one-on-ones and interactions has really increased into the hundreds. Between the small staff, we'll be 400 or 500 people in a short span of time, within just several weeks, and that's been just really possible to do. We got some activity here going on in the chat. So, and are there any hands that are raised? Anyone that would like to actually share?
I would actually like to call out my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Gabrielli. She put in the chat, my small nonprofit, Life Worth Leading, has grown more in the past year than ever before. Initially, the pandemic caused some setbacks, but then the virtual option actually opened more doors. And would just love to share from your perspective, Gabrielle, why you think that is, and how you think you will utilize that to continue as a strategy moving forward.
Yeah, it's always been a small nonprofit, but it is growing so much that I'm having a hard time keeping up. And I have a great leadership team and volunteers, and we are just busier than we've ever been. And so I'm really happy that actually initially the pandemic shut doors for us and it was challenging. But since then, really having virtual options has enabled a lot of possibilities that didn't exist before, including geographically reaching different people. And so, yeah, it's been fantastic. I'm really happy with what's been happening with the nonprofit.
That's really terrific news. So, you know, long term, are you looking at this as a long-term strategy that you want to continue to build on, or what's your thoughts on that? And you said, you know, small
Definitely.
nonprofit, you want to say small, so.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want it to get super big, but it's busy. It's very busy right now, but I'm growing other leaders, which is great, so that I won't be tapped out like Melanie was talking about, being the one person doing absolutely everything. So yeah, so I see it growing and offering more services, and I'm excited.
That's really fantastic. Well, wanting to continue to hear about that. So please just, you know, keep us in the loop.
Thank you.
And Rob Renzi, who is my board member and dear friend as well, put in the chat, the one area not addressed in the survey that I would also be interested is in the status of finding employees during this time and workforce shortages affecting the sector. And couple that with burnout. You know, our sector specifically has been on since the very beginning, and it's tiring. And how do we implement self-care on top of creating a culture where people can nurture themselves, but yet have to be available? I know that's something that a number of our nonprofits have had to face, and would just love to hear others' perspectives on how they've addressed that and navigated that.
And Rob, would you like to unmute and share anything? And I don't know if you would or not, but I just wanted to give you an invitation, a personal invitation, in case you would like to share a couple comments.
I can say that every meeting that I go to, and I go to a lot of collaborative meetings with other organizations in town, and we're all sharing our updates, every single one of them has stated that they're looking for employees. There's not a meeting. I have not been to a meeting in the last 4 months where someone hasn't said, you know, I need people. And we're trying to share resumes amongst it. Maybe someone's not a good fit for one organization, but they're a great, smart, talented individual. Let's pass that along. So it's a problem, and I hear about it all the time.
It looks like Isabel has a comment.
Yeah, so I'm with the Mickey Faust Club down in Railroad Square. And I basically, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think that the hybrid, well, not the hybrid, we have a lot of folks with disabilities. We also have a lot of folks who are immunocompromised among that population. So we closed the day before we were supposed to open our spring cabaret, literally the last dress rehearsal. It was very traumatic for the people who had put a lot of work into it. And we shifted. We weren't able to do anything about that because it was just too late. So, but for the following production in the summer, we shifted to a completely online thing. And that was at the time when everybody was, you know, basically isolating. So the good thing is, because what we do is skits and short things, we were able to kind of farm things out. So a couple could do something, or, you know, family members could do things together. We could piece things together, kind of, and everybody had to learn how to make videos with their phones. I mean, it was literally that kind of thing. We work with Diane Wilkins Productions on a regular basis. So she also then tutored people for things getting more, you know, more sophisticated. We had to buy some software, editing software, video editing software. So there were a lot of things that had to come into play. And it was fun, actually, weirdly enough. So that did give an outlet, a creative outlet to our people at a time when everybody was really kind of hunkering down, including us. So because we're mostly a volunteer organization, pivoting is a little challenging for us sometimes. So we were able to pivot in that direction, and now we're pivoting back to live performances. And I really appreciated Melanie's discussion about hybrid, because I think that's going to be the challenge for us. Again, with a volunteer organization, it's sometimes hard to maintain multiple priorities and multiple systems. So, but I took notes for us to really think about not doing away with the hybrid approach. I don't know if we're going to be able to do performances, but we might be able to put up, like mini previews or many selections of our shows. Definitely be working with people on that so that we continue our online presence. Mickey Faust is unusual because we have more PhDs per square inch than anywhere else, as far as I can tell, seriously. And most of those PhDs are in, things that are creative, writing, performance, etc. So we also have a substantial following around the country and around the world, frankly, because we also write scholarly articles. We have all kinds of stuff like that. So being able to maintain that video presence, I think, is going to be really important to maintaining that. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer. But it's, as I said, the volunteer thing is a hindrance. Our numbers of PhD per square inch is an asset. They don't necessarily complement each other, but they pull in different directions.
Thank you so much, Isabel. That just really fantastic points and ponderings. I want to compliment you for using the power of creativity to really continue that engagement, and the power of the content that all of you are, we kind of talked about too, which is also part of that hybrid programming. When we look across sector, I don't know if there's any other educators that are in this room, but that's definitely, content is king there. And the more that we can just continue to generate content and share it and so on, it's just going to continue to elevate. I'd also be, as the conversation keeps going, Isabel made a great point about volunteers, and that's one of the things we haven't talked about yet and wasn't necessarily in the survey, is that the lifeblood of our volunteers interact with all of our nonprofit organizations, and about how challenging that has been. And if there's anyone that wants to share about volunteers, things that you've been able to do with your programs, are you continuing a volunteer program that's a hybrid program, or anything that we'd like to say about volunteers, we would just love to just make sure that subject stays in this room. So. Anyone else would like to share?
I just want to quickly, to Rob's point, not to go back, but specific to the challenge with hiring. I serve on the local Career Source Capital Region Board here, and we're talking about, how do we access the types of individuals who have had the opportunity to work from home from COVID, to seeing the productivity that they can have, be able to provide the types of culture and incentives that are necessary to appeal to adequate candidates for our vacancies and our job openings. And what we've seen, and what I think we'll see more happen here locally, is 4-day work weeks. Additional stipends and support for childcare. We know that single mothers specifically spend over 30% of their income in childcare, and it oftentimes is a barrier for them to find additional employment because they can't afford the cost of childcare. But also looking at who are the gotta be there's and who doesn't have to be there to provide the hybrid working environment. So I think as a sector, it's really hard because so much of our work is rooted in that face-to-face and direct contact. But I do know trends specifically for most industries are looking at creative ways in which they can be attractive to qualified candidates and, really meet the challenge and the demand for hiring.
Those are some great points, Amber. And the last thing that you talked about that I jotted down here was about the, in a way, how are we used to service delivery, and what does it mean to be together? What does it mean to in service, especially? Does it need to be always hybrid? Does it need to be hybrid? Does it really need to be face-to-face? Can we continue to use virtual spaces to create meaningful relationships? And how do you convince people that those options can work potentially for them? And as folks that deliver this service too, what do we need to do in order to up our game to make sure that all of those levels would have the same kind of care and the same kind of quality? And these are some good challenges for us to look at, because when we looked at service delivery, and we look at also the way that we need to continue to reach out, maybe beyond our neighborhoods, and even beyond our city and county. These are the kinds of methods that are going to be very important for us to do and to use. And so, kind of like we become more tech savvy, in a sense, how do we become more HR savvy in using technology to build meaningful relationships? I'd be really curious about that too. So are there any other comments about volunteers, about hiring, finding employees? Isabel, you want to share?
Yeah, so we're in a very unusual situation. And so what I'm going to say may not be universally helpful, but we got a state grant for funding staffing positions. And more than half of our staff are individuals with disabilities. And it's very part-time. If you've ever had one of those state grants, it's $25,000, the whole pot. So when you divide it among, 5 people, you're looking at not a lot of money for everybody, but they're part-time. These are people who are unemployed or underemployed. And that was one of our criteria for selection, by the way. So, but all that just to say, that's what makes it unusual. But we did, again, we managed to work, for example, during the COVID period when the worst of it, we were able to do physical work in our space by having people schedule things so that they would work individually or in pods, and to avoid cross-contamination. So that was one of the things that we did. A lot of the work that people do can be done virtually, especially things administrative and even production stuff. When we were doing all virtual, obviously that could be done. So we did most of that. We still to this day do what we call our pandemic executive team meetings via Zoom or Google meetings or something like that. So, they're definitely, but, once you get into production, it's a different story. Then, people have to be there if we're doing live productions. So just sharing that. So there were ways of living in a virtual world, even with our employees during the pandemic. We don't have the same problems that Amber mentioned because we're very, limited in how we're selecting our employees. And when all is said and done, we probably have the equivalent of 1 FTE between all of them, plus our other professional volunteers.
That's terrific. Thank you so much, Isabel, for sharing. And again, if you haven't already, if you wouldn't mind popping your email and phone number, I think folks might be very interested in connecting with you, especially on what you did to make sure that any special needs employees were taken care of. That's wonderful. Let's see. So I think that unless I'm looking through the room, I'm not seeing any other hands up right now. Our last question really had to do, and we're kind of talking about, we've been transitioning over there too, about what are ways that we need to move forward from here. So what are the ways, we were looking at that more sector wide, but we can certainly look at that individually within our nonprofits, but what are the ways that we need to move forward from here? And so we have talked a lot about growth miles and hybrid programming and creativity in ways that we need to look at people and how people are taken care of, how we look at program delivery and things. But what else is on your mind, or anything else you would like to share on that? Do you have any ideas about what are the ways we need to move forward from here? We definitely want to know that as the leaders, so we can make sure we're advocating and we are pointing in the right direction.
Or how about just in general? I'm always curious to know, what are people looking for in terms of programming needs? What are your programming needs? And I know a lot of it depends on the stage you're in, your maturity as far as your nonprofit. The beginning ones have different needs than the ones that have been around for a little bit longer. But I always want to hear what would be most beneficial to you. Does it have something to do with board development and relations? Does it have to do with fundraising? Does it have to do with risk management or financial accountability type training, budgeting issues? If you would share a few suggestions, I would appreciate it.
This is Melanie again, and I'm kind of in a unique situation because I manage two organizations. One's a theater organization, Monticello Acting and Dance Company. I'm the founder of it, and the other is, of course, the artist series, which is really the job that pays me. The other one is just kind of my heart. I've done it forever, but going forward, it's just so hard to know because audiences are so unpredictable right now. So it's hard to know what to say, and there are so many other factors that have rolled in on top of all this, because now you have the push. We've always tried to be diverse in our artists and the people we select and the people we bring in, but we're still having to deal with, how do you get more diversity in your programming? How do you get more people of color to want to audition for you? Monticello, now the problem with that is the gas prices are astronomical. So people don't want to come in to rehearse because it's a huge amount of money for these people who are community theater actors. It's really tough. So how do I find space in Tallahassee to rehearse without it costing me anything? Because the problem is we already have a rehearsal space that we're paying on. So to have to pay for a second rehearsal space is just very difficult. So we're always working to try to find a place that we can rehearse, that kind of thing. With the artist series, our artists are professional artists. They come in, there's no rehearsal thing there. But now we have the added expense of, even though it's great, but of filming, our concerts. We have that. And one thing that I will say to everyone is we're going to try it. We're actually going back to our 2019 prices. We lowered our ticket prices for 2020 and 2021. We did a lot of free stuff just to get people to stay with us. We're going back to our prices. So we've raised it, and still, even with raising our prices, our seniors are still going to they're getting a $25 discount, essentially. They're on 6 concerts, and we've added a concert. So we're trying different things. We're trying to think of different ways to make enough money, because essentially grants and donation, grants can pay for a lot of your artist fees, but then how do you pay for me? I'm the employee. How do you do that? So you still have to sell tickets, and you still have to have donations coming in, because grants don't really pay for that unless you're specifically applying for, an administrative sort of, grant, which I know you can do. We're choosing not to do it that way. So it's, it's all there's just so many challenges. I don't know that we have the answers. I guess I'm just pointing out more issues that I think everyone is maybe having. And the only thing I can say to you all is that the artist series especially is very lucky because we don't have offices. I work from my dance studio and I work from my home. So we don't have the overhead of an office. And I think that helped us a lot because we bring in small ensemble acts. I think it was easier for us to maintain a pre-recorded concert series or a live stream series rather, because we not like the symphony. Symphony has a huge amount of people that have to perform.
Sure.
When it came to theater, Madco did very well because when COVID started, it really wasn't a problem for children. The COVID problem just wasn't the problem when it started.
Sure.
So even in 2020, I was able to do a show outside in the heat of July wearing face shields. And we rehearsed and performed, and we rehearsed outside, and it was incredibly hot. And we limited our audience to just 50 people outside, spread apart on blankets, bringing their own chairs. And we wrote our own show and our own music. And we were able to still do 4 shows in 2020 before anybody was vaccinated and not one person got sick.
That's
But once
fantastic.
again, things changed, you know, and then the
Sure.
Delta came up. So then I was concerned about doing that.
Yep.
We've still been able to
You've-
perform. We've
Yep.
still been able to continue to perform. We haven't had any problems, but we've also done it as safely as we can.
It's
We
quite
have
a
really
deal.
worked on that.
Yep, and I think that that's
hard.
that's really fantastic, and I'm so glad that you've shared your contact information so
Mhm.
folks can get a hold of
Sure.
you. You can pick your brain on this. It's really great.
Sure.
You brought it up some, you know, the diversification of funding, and especially coming up and finding also ways to stay diverse, but also that have those funding sources open so that they're not restricted funds that you're finding. You are finding as many kind of diverse funding that can really kind of go across the sector is really important. Your point, Melanie, about the business model and kind of looking, you know, really looking creatively at your own business model, and can you space share, or can you office differently, or, you know, what are some of the expenses that absolutely you need to run your business, but maybe they can be shared or be looked at differently. Those are really some interesting things to look at in regards to that. Is there anyone else that has any programming needs or requests that you'd like us to look into, especially as we move forward from here as a cohort and look at how we can service you best? And I am not seeing anything right now. So if you have some other thoughts on this, you know, again, please feel free to use the chat and share your thoughts and things. And I think that looks like we're getting close to time, so we'll go ahead and just start wrapping up now. And I'm going to toss this over to Kim, who's got a few things to share before we say goodbye.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating in this conversation today. I learned a lot, and hopefully we can do something like this again. This insight is very important to help us understand the sector needs and how we can collaboratively address them to continue to advocate for what our community needs. A couple of things I'd like to remind you of today. You don't want to miss this conference, the UPHS conference. Today is the last day to sign up, and the conference is June 7th and 8th. I know it's going to be phenomenal because I know Amber, so I know it's going to be, and I know it's going to be phenomenal. So do we have the link up there for people that, or will it be in the chat for people to sign up?
Yes,
It's
Eric
already there.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Another great event, the Florida Nonprofit Alliance Conference will be Thursday, September 29th in Tallahassee. The COVID report will be presented. Also, join, collaborate, Big Bend. That Facebook page, is that going to go up too? So it's Collaborate Big Bend, our Facebook page. We'd love you to join. And we also have mailing lists, COCA, UPHS, INIE. We'd love you to join our mailing list.
Absolutely, that's right.
Kathleen?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kim. Those are great reminders. And at the power of partnerships, that's what Big Bend, joining Collaborate Big Bend will also do, and make sure that you put your collaboration opportunities there, or if you need to find somebody. The conference that Kim mentioned, the Save the Date, we'll be in touch with all of you about more information, but please just mark your calendars on that. That would be awesome. My reminders are three things. A recording of this COVID-19 and Leon County Sector Survey session will be available, along with the one sheet that Amber talked about, which is a summary of the survey and the survey slides. So all of that will be emailed to all of you by early next week. Thank you all for being here and learning together, sharing together. We so appreciate all the work that you do in the community. Thank you so much for talking to us about how you are. It's important for us to know that we are committed to working with you and for you on this to address the community sector needs. So with that, thanks again for spending time with us today. Please keep in touch, stay safe, take care, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Bye now.